Visions of the Black Heaven, Chapter 21. Hans was lost in thought as he drove west on Interstate 64. Valtteri and Kotek started to talk. I have studied languages for years. From the first recorded language of the Sumerians and Hittites, a cuneiform, wedge-shaped language, the Phrygian, Lydian, and Hebrew languages. Yet I cannot find one solid link between the language and the scroll or the medallions except for one obscure observation. Hans wondered where this conversation was going. You live in Calgary, Italy. I live in Antonia, Turkey, near the location of the famed Ur and Mount Hermon, near the location of the Göbekli Tepe. The civilization is estimated to be 12,000 years old. All these places have one thing in common. They are either on or very close to the 37th parallel. That in itself is not unique. But when we think that in an almost direct line there is Cairo, Illinois, named after Cairo, Egypt. Then there's Memphis, Tennessee, named after another city in Egypt. And then there's the state of Arkansas, where there are several myths that the acclaimed Ark of the Covenant at one time rested in the caves of the area. What I find more interesting is that in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and some parts of Illinois exists history of the legendary Mound people, who were rumored to have been ancestors of the Mayans. In some people's opinion, these were the people who were part of the Anakim and the Nephilim of the Bible. Hans answered in disgust and mockery. I do not believe in God. Valtteri caught himself smiling. So, Hans, you do not believe in God? No, barked Hans. May I ask you a few questions? Do you believe in darkness? Hans looked at Valtteri thinking that was a stupid question. Well, yes, I believe in darkness. Valtteri smiled and said, No, Hans, there's no such thing as darkness. See, darkness is the absence of light. Light is energy which can be measured. Darkness is the absence of light. So darkness cannot be measured. Therefore, darkness does not exist. Do you believe in cold? Shut up, Hans barked. His face scowled in frustration. He retorted, My grandfather always told me that enlightenment is not the imagining of figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. The Escalade crested a hill. Hans saw a billboard of the truck stop he had seen in his vision. He remembered the ache in the pit of his gut when he felt his drink fall out of his hand. His eyes squinted in determination. His hands gripped the steering wheel. His heartbeat quickened as if his body was becoming one with the Cadillac. His mind was preparing for the moment he would see his vision become a reality. The thought came to him, I'm not insane. There really is something here. His breathing deepened as the Escalade hit the exit ramp and drove into the truck stop, passing the trucks parked in the gravel lot. Driving to the front of the cafe, he stopped the Escalade. Charlie sat in his usual spot and watched as a black Escalade with dark tinted windows pulled in and stopped. He could see two people in the car, but could not see them clearly. The driver's door opened. A tall, slender man with dark sunglasses got out, standing on one leg, resting his arms on the open door. He had short blonde hair. His face was white, with soft, smooth complexion. He wore an open-collared white dress shirt, dark silk dress slacks with European-style black leather shoes, clothes seldom seen in this part of the country. Watching the man's eyes slowly scanning the building, Charlie saw the stranger remove his sunglasses and look directly at him through the truck stop window. He gasped and shivered as he saw the intensity of his eyes. Charlie felt his eyes open wide as the dream he could never remember started to become a reality. The sheriff drove into the truck stop and saw the Escalade with a man standing on one leg looking around. Out of habit, the sheriff wrote down the license plate number, then watched as the Escalade door closed and sped off. The sheriff went into the cafe, sat down next to Charlie. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." Charlie took a sip of his cold coffee, whispering to the sheriff, "Something's about to happen. I'm not sure exactly what or when, but it has to do with the mountain man, Duke, and the Schroeders." The sheriff looked at Charlie, remembering the near rumble between the Schroeders and Duke and the other man that they called Thor. He got his radio out and called the license plate number, asking for information. Mary Ellen served the special of the day to one of the truck drivers sitting at the horseshoe counter. A hot roast beef sandwich with mashed potatoes and smothered in brown gravy with a side of yellow corn and a fresh-made biscuit. Then she nodded to the sheriff that she'd be right there with his coffee. The police radio crackled its response. "The plate you called about is a rental car from Louisville. It's rented to Hans Schroeder III from Calgary, Italy." Captain Williams arrived in a state trooper cruiser, walked in and sat with Charlie and the sheriff. Mary Ellen brought the coffee and 3 fresh cups. She listened to Charlie as she filled the cups. "Well," Charlie said, "I don't expect you to believe me. Hell, I'm not sure I believe myself. But for the past few months, I've had the same horrible dream, but I can only remember some of the details. The Schroeders and that mountain man they call Duke are in it, and giants, dark figures, which look like large shadows, figures of light all walking around. There was a battle, and I don't know anything more than that. Whatever happens is not good for anyone. That's all I can tell you." Williams thanked Mary Ellen for the coffee and gave her a look that said this was a conversation she really did not need to hear. The less people knew, the less they talked. The less they talked, the less problems there were later on, and that's the way he liked it. The less problems, the better. Williams continued in that voice, a low whisper that could be heard all over the truck stop. "Wonder who this Hans Schroeder III is, and why is he here? Yeah, I understand it's not a crime to visit or to be here, but something just does not seem right." Williams looked at the sheriff. "Good job on that license plate, Sheriff. Keep your eyes open. Contact me if anything out of the norm happens. I have to agree with Charlie. There's something happening here, and whatever it is not good." Williams had an idea. He left the truck stop. As he started the car, he had a memory of his grandmother years ago talking in their native Iroquois tongue. "Remember to ask how." He saw his grandmother hold up her right hand and say, "They will return." Williams remembered how his ancestors would greet a stranger. They would raise one hand and say, "How?" meaning how many fingers were on their hand, 5 or 6. Williams had known of and read of Indian accounts of how a strange man with 6 fingers and 6 toes could run down a buffalo, kill it barehanded, then disappearing into the nothingness. Driving on Highway 37, the exit for Mammoth Cave, he turned north, headed toward the hills of southwestern Indiana. Taking a dirt road off the highway, he followed the path to the hidden valley of his ancestors. Following the dirt road to the top rim of the valley where he grew up in, driving past meadows, forests, caves, as he explored as a child with his grandfather, learning the legends, myths, and the old ways of his people. Looking around, he saw the light seemed to be different. Not brighter, not dimmer, just different. The last time he saw this was when his grandfather was alive. Grandfather had a strange look of concern in his eyes. He was a little boy then, and Grandpa did not want to scare him. Yet he knew that something was wrong then, and something is wrong now. Arriving, walking into his grandmother's house, she sat cross-legged, rocking back and forth on the floor with her candles and incense burning around her. She looked up at him, her eyes puffy from weeping, which spoke volumes. They are here, the evil ones, the sky people. I can feel it, the people with 6 fingers and 6 toes. His grandmother focused on a distant memory. She held up one hand, then looked deep into William's eyes, repeating, "Remember to ask how." Her shaky voice repeated. Williams listened carefully to the words of his grandmother. "We left the sky people, evil people with 6 fingers and 6 toes. They lived in the land of the hot sun, killed many for the joy of seeing death." His grandmother started to chant her prayer of protection for her, her family, her people. The prayer was a mystical chant where she almost seemed to sleep, speaking the same words over and over again as a prayer to her God. Williams knew it was time to leave. His people were tribal leaders and medicine men. They understood the legends of the past. He knew enough to listen to the warnings. He had to find out what was happening and do what was needed as soon as possible. Getting back into the cruiser, he headed out to the interstate.